Pre svega, želim da vam se zahvalim, dragi prijatelji, dragi kolege, što ste došli u ovolikom broju da večeras ispratimo predavanje gospodina Kristijana Borea, gradskog arhitekte Brisela, u okviru ASAP Pro Talksa i u okviru jedne radne grupe koju sprovodimo već neko vreme u ASAP-u, koja se bavi temom konkursa. ASAP je jedna jako mlada organizacija i dalje. Postoji tek 3 godine i bilo je kao juče, sećam se jako dobro, kada smo započeli razgovore na temu kako da poboljšamo uslove arhitekture, arhitekte, među kolegama i tu istu, da kažemo, taj isti entuzijazam koji sam tada osetio, lično osjećam i dan danas. I neizmerno mi je drago da u okviru ove radne grupe možemo da ugostimo jednog takvog gosta koji će sa nama da podeli svoja iskustva iz Brisela. I ono što je jako važno je reći da gospodin Bore je već 10 godina na mestu, na poziciji glavnog arhitekta Brisela i pokazalo se, pa možda iz nekog mog ličnog iskustva, da je 10 godina period koji je potreban jednoj organizaciji, jednoj instituciji ili čak jednoj osobi da napravi razliku. Možda ta razlika nekada nije ni tako očigledna, ali temelji te razlike su ono što se nadam da će večeras gospodin Bore da pokaže. Čini mi se da je ASAP da je i dalje zasnovan na najvećoj snazi za kojoj, da kažemo, počiva, a to je ta inicijativa članova, inicijativa ili samo inicijativa, taj dogovor, inicijalni dogovor ljudi koji ga čine da stvore bolje uslove. I u tom kontekstu ja mislim da će večerašnje predavanje i razgovor koji se nadam da ćemo moći da vodimo uveliko da pokaže da određene alate već imamo, da određeno znanje već imamo i da je možda to više sada stvar kontinuiteta i nekakve istrajnosti. So just to introduce you shortly, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to Belgrade and to ASAP. My name is Nemanja Zimonjić, as some of you might know. I'm a member of ASAP and I speak in the ASAP's name tonight. But Christian Bore is not your typical architect. He doesn't just build structures, objects, he reshapes how cities evolve. As Brussels' Baumeister Maître Architect, for now a decade, as I said, he wielded something he calls soft power. What that is, he will try to explain tonight to us. But he wielded it through cutting, through bureaucracy, with dialogue, design, and actually in deep belief in public good. Part urban strategist, part cultural and social agitator, Christian has turned the messy beauty of Brussels into a living lab of architecture, proving actually that at the end the city is not a problem that one solves. It is actually a story we all co-write. In a way, I like to believe that it is about setting the table for all of us to join it. You also previously worked in Antwerp as the Baumeister and are currently teaching at Ghent University as the professor of architecture. So he's a city maker who doesn't just imagine better urban futures. He builds the conditions for them to emerge. How you do it, you will say. He tries to facilitate a change which is inevitable in every society under pressure, under unknown circumstances, such as ours. He supports new voices in it. As Brussels' Baumeister during this decade, he turned the policy into cultural force. Under his guidance, I think it is about 400 competitions that have been launched, which is quite impressive if you think about the average. They bring innovation, they bring transparency, they bring new voices, they bring a certain civic pride. Some colleagues of yours from Brussels told me that you never imposed visions. You cultivated them. You welcomed architects, residents, activists, city makers to the table. He opened the doors, literally. And his legacy is a fantastic and dynamic city, a professional network. Brussels is more open, more thoughtful, not perfect, I learned today, more beautifully complex than ever before. In a way, how I think we also share that and how we see it, how Belgrade is, and how we all also want it to be. So let's listen to Christian, and the floor is yours. Welcome to ASAP.
Thank you. Good evening to all of you. I'm happy to be here and to talk about Brussels, and I would like also to thank, of course, ASAP for the invitation. You should know in Belgium we have a kind of similar system. We have a kind of official level of organization of the architects where you have to be registered and for the licensing and so on. They are necessary and institutional and important, but not very dynamic. And then you have the kind of bottom-up organization of architects. In Flanders it's called NAV, like your ASAP. And I think that's very important, that also architects themselves organize themselves, and so that they organize exchange of knowledge, improving the conditions of work, and also improving just the quality of work. So I really can't stimulate you enough to join or to support ASAP. Thanks also for the nice introduction. I think it's very flattering, of course, but it also shows, so congratulations that you well understood what it is in Brussels about, because Brussels is indeed, it's not about harmony, perfection, everything okay. You will see it's also a bit like your city. Therefore, first a bit about Brussels so that you know where I come from and why it's similar to Belgrade. So Brussels is not one thing. It's not one dimension. Yeah, you have these kind of cities that are very clear. Bruges is about medieval center and so on. Brussels, it's many things. So it's a capital. It's a region and a city as well, so it's a special thing. It's the capital of Belgium. It's the capital of Europe, you could say. It's the capital of NATO. So there are therefore many levels. On the other hand, in number of inhabitants, it's medium-scale European city, 1.250. Not that much. And so you could imagine Brussels as a point, a city in an open landscape. Of course, in this part of Europe, that makes no sense. You have urbanity everywhere. You have urbanization everywhere. Next city is Antwerp. That's only half an hour by train or by car. So when I was the bouwmeester of Antwerp, I just kept living in Brussels and I was commuting every day. You have the Randstad of the Netherlands, the Ruhr area in Germany. So urbanity, a city, is also this kind of carpet metropolis in our country. And so we don't have wild nature left. So it's a city and part of a city network. It's Belgium, so that means it's complicated. You know that we have two languages. In fact, we have three languages. We have a German-speaking minority, and then the country has been subdivided in regions. So you have regions, but you also have language communities, and they have not exactly the same territory. You have the bilingual region of Brussels, but it's surrounded by Dutch-speaking Flanders, and so on and so on. So my regular joke, in fact, is if you would have understood how Belgium is organized, that means I have badly explained it, because it's so complicated that you just can't explain it in an easy way. Also, on the level of Brussels itself, and I think I understood that's a bit similar to Belgrade or Belgrade. You have still 19 municipalities, each of them with a mayor, each of them with their own competences still. So you have to negotiate a lot. And to make it even more confused, So this is Brussels region, and then one of those municipalities is also called Brussels. So you have city of Brussels, Brussels region, and it's not the same thing. So it's a difficult thing. So also on the institutional level, Brussels is a complex thing. So it's we call it a lasagna of institutional levels, and you have to cross and to get into negotiation with all of them. That leads to this kind of situations. So now you can laugh with Brussels and then it's finished. So you could ask yourself, why the hell is the guy that is cleaning the road suddenly stopping and not going on? Well, that's because this is the municipality of Ixelles and this is the municipality of the city of Brussels. Cleaning the roads is municipal competence, so there's no coordination. So they are not cleaning the roads. And of course, for an urban planner, for an architect, this is one space, but in administrative terms, so there is really a border. One more dimension of Brussels is it's a rich city and a poor city at the same time. So the average income is quite high, but here you see the average income, and darker is higher. So then you see that the rich, they live more on the eastern side and also more in the green municipalities away from the center. Same thing, but in the opposite direction. For unemployment, you see a lot of unemployment within the city center. So Brussels is a bit like, we call it like Detroit, poor in the center, rich in the suburbs. And that's, for a European capital, exceptional. If you go to Vienna, if you go to Paris, it's extremely expensive to live in the city center. So again, multiple dimensions. And the last one, but perhaps the most important one, is this one. If you look at the inhabitants in Brussels, there is really an enormous proportion of diversity. So 1 of 3 people living in Brussels is not a Belgian, is a foreigner. Half of them are expats, working for the international institutions. Yeah, but it's gliding away. I will not touch it anymore. Yeah. And half of them is recent migrants. Brussels in Europe is the city with the highest number of nationalities. And perhaps, I think it's more clear when I explain this one. So I'm the child of 2 Belgian parents, and that makes me a minority in my city. So the majority of the people in Brussels is born abroad, nearly 70% now, or has at least one parent that is born abroad. And so that should change the perspective of how to deal with city planning, with local culture, with what is vernacular, what is typical for the city. And we are coping with it. We don't have a good answer. But it's really important to know that Brussels is a city of minorities. There is no light culture anymore. There's not one leading culture. You have a kind of absolute diversity. And then you have this kind of image of the city. It's not always beautiful. It certainly is not cute or pretty. It's, of course, you have a clash of scales, a clash of architectural styles, programs, all one bric-a-brac of different kind of architecture. It's, of course, the result of bad urban governance, especially in the second half of the 20th century. But it's there, so you have to deal with it. And what I've been trying to do also in my job as Bouwmeester is to construct a narrative that says, okay, but this is not a problem. In any way, we want to reconstruct a 19th century city, so don't be vain. You will not be able to repair this. So let's not consider this as a problem, but let's consider this as an opportunity. Because this means that for architecture in Brussels, you have a lot of potential. There is not a kind of canon that says how you have to do it. We are not like Vienna, but we don't have the burden of the harmony of the inner city of Vienna where if you do something, you have to be very careful and to respect what is there. Here you have opportunities, potential. Architecture is not defined in terms of style, but there are a lot of possibilities. Architecture or new interventions in the city should, of course, improve the city, remediate, repair, heal the city, but they can be something else. They can be very diverse. And so that's why perhaps if you go back, if the people of the city are like this, then it's good that the city looks like this as well. So the ideal of the future European city should perhaps not be the ideal of harmony of the 19th century, the city and the landscape, and very much in equilibrium. But the ideal of the European city of the future could be this kind of very lively combination of everything. And so that's why we see what's happening, has been happening in Brussels and what has been happening in your city, because you have a clash of styles and so on as well. You shouldn't see it as a problem that you have to repair, a kind of trauma and suffering. You should see it as a really open opportunity for a lot of future architectural projects. So that's the storytelling we try to promote, in fact, in Brussels. Now about bouwmeester. A strange thing, bouwmeester, so it's a Dutch word. It's a very old-fashioned word. It has some medieval connotations, so the master of building or something like that. It has been translated in French, maître architecte, in an awkward way. So it's a very specific role. So you could translate it as city architect, but you will learn in a minute that it's not exactly the same thing. So bouwmeesters in Belgium, it's also quite recent. So the first ones were installed in Flanders, region of Flanders and city of Antwerp, around 2000. Then in Brussels, 2009. So the official title is then bouwmeester / maître architect, bilingual city. Then in Charleroi, in the French-speaking part of Belgium, which is funny because they kept the title bouwmeester. They just pronounce it bouwmeester, something like that. And then also in Ghent, a city of 150,000 inhabitants. And we are waiting for the French-speaking part of Belgium, Wallonia, also to install a bouwmeester. So there is a tradition, but it's quite a recent tradition. The role was inspired by the Dutch Rijksbouwmeester on the level of the country, of the kingdom, who has been existing since the 19th century, and who originally was also the architect of the city, building the buildings of the city, designing the buildings of the city, the schools of the city, and so on. Of course, today it's something else. The mission is much broader and much larger. Perhaps first, the BMA, what it is not. So I'm not the head of the planning administration in Brussels. So I'm not in the hierarchy of the system. I have no director general above me, but I also have no administration below me. And so, but I'm directly accountable to the government. So as I said, it's not only dealing with the own projects of the city, the task is larger. I'm also not the one that is finally deciding on building permits. So we have another administration where they evaluate the building permit applications and also decide on yes or no in the end. So in that sense, it's not, I don't know, your city architect is also another kind of position. There are a lot of differences in Europe, but in some German cities, for instance, the city architect is in fact the head of the administration and is also having managerial competences. It's not like this. I'm also not just a consultant, and I work a lot with politicians, but I'm not a politician myself, so I'm neutral. So what is it? The BMA is appointed by the government, but working in an independent position. I'll come back on that. And then, as you have already understood, the mission is quite broad. It's improving the design quality of urban development projects in Brussels. So you could do everything. Of course, you have to choose, and each bouwmeester also puts his or her own emphasis. So this is crucial. So there is an open call, but then finally the government appoints a bouwmeester and gives the bouwmeester the possibility to be independent. So that means I'm paid by the government to be critical, which is a very luxury position. Of course, if you would be critical on every decision, so I have the kind of liberty of speech. If you have, would you be critical on every decision of the government in urban planning every day, and especially if you would do that every day in the newspaper, then you could ask yourself, yeah, why don't you quit and why don't you leave? Because you mustn't be very happy if your entire life is about being negative and critical. But also, you will lose some impact. So they will try you to put aside and so on. On the other hand of the spectrum, if you're never critical and always praising that it's fine and not saying anything, then you're not a bouwmeester. Then you're just a kind of flower pot, let's say, for decoration, and then you're not useful. So in between, you have to find the kind of right way of acting. And so this hybridity is ultra important. So you're in and out of the system. In the system because you have access to the politicians and because you collaborate with all of the administration. So there is collaboration, of course. We are housed in the building of the public administration. But you're also out of the system because you have this freedom of speech, you can take your own initiatives, and you act as a kind of bridge between the world of policy and the world of practitioners. And so this possibility of working in a horizontal way or transversal, that's crucial. So in big organizations, you always have this kind of silos. And in, for instance, in Brussels, the people of the, let's say, the Ministry of Mobility, they think public space is theirs. But then you have the people of the environment. No, public space is theirs because you have to create parks and so on. And so they want, it's not always easy to have them collaborating. As a bouwmeester, because you belong to no one, you can collaborate with everyone. You, in a kind of pseudo, fake, naive way, you can say, I'm innocent, I have no boss, so I can work with everyone. And so, of course, transversality is today important, I think, for quality. So we have a lot of problems, climate change, social problems, and so on. And you know that they can't be solved within one discipline. You need to work together. And a bouwmeester has this kind of agility or mobility to move in between these roles. And so that's why it's really different than some other more classic roles. And also, I'm really enjoying that kind of position, you can imagine. It's a person, but from time to time I say we, because there is also a team in the bouwmeester cabinet, or 15 people, quite young people, very motivated people. All of the working, so these are civil servants, so they will remain, and they guarantee the continuity, because the bouwmeester every 5 years should change. So I had 2 terms, which is perhaps exceptional, but the idea is that from time to time it changes, so that there is a new perspective, so that there is a new emphasis. So they guarantee also continuity. What do? We have something like 4 main activities. So of course, there is also a lot of activity behind the screens, trying to influence politicians, trying to convince developers, talking with architects. So that's a big part of the job, is also this kind of connecting work. But 4 more formal jobs: the label, the review, the research by design, and competitions. I will talk more about competitions because that's really at stake here. So a quick overview of the other ones. So label is each year. So in public procurement, or if the government wants something studied, so it's, in fact, the brief is defined by the government. We look for a team to build a school, or we look for a team to think about circularity in construction. Or we look for a team that should work on new standards for biodiversity. Here we turn it the other way around. We say, okay, we have an open call, and what do you think are subjects that we should work on? So what is not yet treated by public authority? So what could be research subjects for the future? So you can make a proposal, and so each year we have a call, and we are looking then for new proposals that we were not thinking about and that really are in the beginning. So we ask teams to make a proposal. We could do a research on that, on that, and that. It's not fully developed. It's just the first idea, but I think it's really crucial. And then we select 3 of them. We give them a bit of money, 7,500 euros without TVA, so that they have some time to finally work on it. You work in an office, you have an idea, but you have never time to develop the idea because there's always daily work, so they can buy some time. We help them in communication and some public attention, but also we give them our address book, so our contact list, so that they can try to that they can feed their idea with contacts, and so in the end, so perhaps it will climb up the ladder and one day become official policy. So that's the label BMA. Then there is the most formal one, but quite important, is but not very sexy to explain. So if you want to apply for a building permit in Brussels and your project is above 5,000 square meters, then the legislation says that you have to ask a design review at the BMA, and you have to join it in your building permit application. That doesn't mean that we can say yes or no, because we can't decide, but we have the opportunity to feed the discussion on the building permit and to bring some arguments. It's also a leverage for private developers to come and see and contact us early on. Because, okay, now that they know, okay, we'll have to go there anyway, just before the building permit, then perhaps it's more useful to come earlier. And that's an important leverage for us, because then we can try to influence the project. If you are there early, you have more impact. Because in the end, if a project arrives in building permit phase and we've never seen it, then in fact we have failed, I think so. And everyone is angry. The developer is angry because now there are some remarks and that will cost a lot of money. The architect is angry because he has finished his drawings, he has to adapt drawings. I'm angry because I feel neglected and they didn't call me in the beginning. So it's better to really be there in the beginning. And so that's why we are working that much on competitions, because competitions is really the beginning of the project. Research by design, which is an expensive word, to say that I think if we want to discuss on architecture, we can use words. I can see Excel tables on the table, but I want a drawing on the table as well. I think our tool, our medium of architects, the drawing, the image, the map, should be used in feeding the debate. And so that's why I have some people in my team who are making drawings, sketches and images. Not because we want to play architect ourselves and we want to have it built that way, because that's not our role, but to feed the discussion. Sometimes it's very simple. So there is an idea for a new area and we will build 100,000 square meters. And that will bring 4 million euro, and that's fine, and so on. But there was never a drawing. Yeah, what does it mean? Is it 1 tower, 3 towers? What if you would make 6-story buildings? Do you have space left for a park? And so we provide these very easy, sketchy drawings in order to show the image. And so 100,000 square meters, that represents this. We all agree that this is quality? Not really, yeah? Okay, let's make then 80,000 square meters. So that's very important. So sometimes it's very reactive. so in the framework of a building project. So this is along the canal. You have in Brussels, along the canal, there is a lot of regeneration, but we want to keep a bit of the couleur locale, the spirit of the buildings there, so industrial buildings. And we also want to avoid that it becomes what we call a Belgian coast. So all buildings of the same height, a kind of massive wall of apartment buildings. So we want irregularity. And so there was a developer, he proposed this one, not a very beautiful building, but also demolishing one of those industrial hangars. And then we started drawing alternatives. Yes, but you could also do it in this way and this way and this way. And this way is having the same amount of square meters. This is 10% less, not so bad, but better in quality and so on. And so finally, it was this one. So you could say, okay, it won't win the Pritzker Prize. It's still standard architecture. But we managed to keep a building. We managed to have some kind of irregularity, so not a wall, and also an open space with some trees along the canal and so on. So that's research by design is challenging projects. And so therefore you need, on the side of the public government, people who know to draw, not just people, just civil servants who know to write the text for the building permits. A second one is more proactive. So you have them as well. So new craft breweries. So those are two marketing boys that were very good in promoting a new beer, Brussels beer project. And they wanted now to make the beer in Brussels itself. So they're looking for a site. And so we helped them to find a site, to negotiate with the municipality, to negotiate with this neighbor that the green space could be used by both. So creating the potential for the site, launching it into a competition as a kind of framework, and then the result was this building by Office Kerstengeers, David van Zeveren. So that's typical Bouwmeester stuff. So taking an initiative, using design in order to help advancing projects, to help these guys, but also in view of the public good, as you said, or in view of more quality. Sometimes it's really on the long term. This is a prospective project. Then it's not done by us. For instance, this is done by an external office thinking about the 20th century belt of Brussels and how that area could be densified. Competitions. So that's our main job. 50% of the time is organizing competitions. That's also why the Bouwmeesters were installed something like 20 years ago, because European legislation was then changing, and so there was a European directive that had to be translated in Belgian law on public procurement. Before, public procurement was okay and was legal, but in many cases, in fact, the architect winning was the architect of the same political party of the mayor. Or you had this kind of solutions, okay, then 3 architects for each party one. So that there is a kind of consensus. So that's, of course, not quality. And so that was why the Bouwmeester was installed. We need a kind of person or institution that is a buffer between architects and politicians, or between developers and politicians. And that takes responsibility for organizing this public procurement system. And so that's how today I think we have a good competition culture in Belgium, thanks to 2025 experience of developing and refining that competition system. What I've been adding in Brussels is also competitions for private developers. So not just for public projects, but also for private developers. So today in Brussels, in the good years, this year is a bad year because we have no government and everything is on hold. But last year, normally we have an average of something like 50 competitions per year. So every week a competition. Competition, I use it also if there are juridical specialists in the room? I don't know. So, but it's just one word for all kind of public procurement procedures, private competitions, and so on. Some images, and then some technical stuff that, but I guess you're all interested also in the way that the competition works. Because competitions, so that's many people think about competitions and think about the opera or the new museum or a special folie thing like this, footbridge between two parts of the Belgian parliament, done by Kerstin Geers and David van Zeveren once more. So it's a kind of bijou, it's a jewel. On the other hand, it's important, but it shouldn't just be this kind of projects, it's also these kind of projects. So for me, architecture quality is not just for Sunday, but also for Monday morning. So for ordinary programs, for housing, 6 social apartments on a difficult plot in Anderlecht, a difficult area, where private developers do not want to work because the area is not bringing enough money and the plot is a bit irregular, so you can't make standard apartments, you have to think. And so we organize also these kind of competitions. Also more complex projects. So for some time we've been organizing a lot of competitions on what we call productive city. So the idea that you should keep some industrial activity, small-scale industrial activity in the city, that you shouldn't push everything outside. We will always need plumbers in the city. You can't repair your bathroom online, so you need a plumber. And a plumber in Brussels, we've been pushing them out of the city, so there's some kind of small storage space for the plumber, or where you can go and buy some spare parts. We've been pushing it out. And now we realize that it was stupid, because these are essential programs for the city. And we should, as planners, provide space for that kind of programs in the city. Also, economy in the future will be not large scale, but small scale. It will be more environmental, ecological. It will be more fair. So you can integrate it in the city. And it would be such a shame that in 10 years, 20 years, in Brussels, we have to say, yes, it could have been integrated in the city, but we forgot to provide some space. And so that's now why we have a lot of projects where there is space, combined projects, in fact. You have space for small and medium enterprises here on the ground floor, the larger one here, with a truck that can come that way, the smaller ones below, those parts of the project that are housing, dwelling up. And so you can combine both. And it's also, we don't have much space left in Brussels, so you have to combine. And then the architectural idea is also that you don't have to separate those two worlds. Let's also show that work, labor, manufacturing deserves good architecture. So it's the same architecture. That it may be visible in the city. And that there can be some exchange. So these people, they can still see what happens below. And if you're working here, you can quickly enjoy city life on the other side of the road. So this is a project by a public real estate company that combines those two programs. So a lot of competitions that we've been organizing were on that topic. Here there's another project, same story in fact. Public space projects, of course, but also private development projects. So this is Tour Taxi for the people who have been perhaps in Brussels. So this is one of the major regeneration sites where we've been helping the private developer to organize the competition for all of the housing. And so now I think 5 to 10% of the competitions that we are organizing are for private developers. For me, that was for me a clear strategy. If you want to work on improving the city, you just can't limit yourself to the public projects. In Brussels, public projects, that's a safe world. So the client is public, they know they should think about quality. So it's a kind of ivory tower. I thought, no, if we want to work on quality in Brussels, we have to work on the quality of housing, and housing is produced by the private sector mainly. So we have to tackle that sector as well. Competitions in Brussels or Belgium in general. So on your website, you will find some kind of summary. We have something like 10 points that are essential for a good competition. If the client, public or private, doesn't respect these points, it's without us. We refuse it. So we are able to take this firm point of view only now, not in year 10. Yes, in year 2, I had to be much more convincing and negotiating and so on. So there has been some progress. So the first thing, and I will not run all over them. So if you're interested, you should study our website. But I will explain you some of the points that are important and also illustrate with projects. So a good competition, it's about the procedure. We can discuss a lot about the transparency and so on and the criteria that we use. But it's also important that the question that you ask to the architects is clear. If your question is not clear, you will have no clear answers. So that's one of the things that we are still trying to improve. We are working a lot on having a clear program, and not program in the sense of 4 classrooms, 10 toilets for a female, 4 toilets for, and so on. Not this kind of shopping list, but also what is your ambition as a client? What do you want that the building does? And we try to push the client to put one ambition stronger. So not to be sustainable on all aspects and so on, but to be strategic, to choose what is really relevant and crucial for this project. We also try, so from the competition from the moment that the competition is launched, so the very first moment, that all information is available. So what is happening in the second round of the competition, because the competition is always in 2 rounds, that the architects know, okay, I have everything now, and I can then decide to participate in the competition or not. So for instance, this is a former military barracks, and the client was a university. So it's a university program in it now. And of course, the university wanted to have a circular project. Circularity is the new sustainability. It's a kind of buzzword, and it's everything. And then we pushed them, and also, so we pushed them, but they were also willing to push, being pushed. It's a kind of action-reaction. And so they really put the focus on reuse of materials and biosourced materials. And so this is the winning project that is now realized by BC Arhitekten, who are really working on reuse of materials. So these are marble pieces of the windowsills that were reused for the floors. This is hennep. In English, it's called hemp. Hemp and straw are being used for acoustic isolation. So it's very much about biosourced materials and about reuse of materials. What I like a lot is that it doesn't look like an alternative interior of an activists committee. So it looks chic. It looks a bit like an English club if you go now to the building. And so it proves that reused materials can also be sophisticated quality of architecture in that sense. I've skipped that one because in Brussels it's now evident for everyone, but we always work in 2 stages. First stage is public call for applications. All architects who respond to some conditions can apply. And then we select 3 to 5 to make a proposal. So in the first stage, no design work, no creativity required, because we think you should pay for creative ideas. So you can't just expect that architects give you their ideas for free. Also, the fee for the architect, so for the project later, is fixed. So we say it will be, we, together with the client, it will be 10% of the budget, and that will be the fee for doing the project. And these are the tasks that you have to do, supervision of works or not, so that everything is clear. And so that there is no concurrence on the fee. So in the jury later, the fee, the lowest, the cheapest architect, that is neutralized. That doesn't play a role. That's important to protect the architects against themselves. Because there's always one that is a price breaker and goes below what is normal or what is feasible. It's also helping the client, because I remember in the beginning there was sometimes a competition with 30% of the points on the fee, and then the client was choosing the project and he thought that is the best project, that's really, the project is fantastic and it's feasible and it's reasonable, it's not crazy, I want that architect. Shit, it's the most expensive one. And he was willing to pay, because the difference is often small. But we had to manipulate the points and so on, because there is a kind of formula. And so let's get rid of that system. Let's be transparent. This is the fee. If you think it's not enough as an architect, don't participate. And also, the client will not negotiate afterwards about the fee. So it's very important also to have in the jury a focus on quality. You only look to the quality. We have a public call for applications, so it's very much open. And then we have very low access conditions. So before in Belgium, suppose public authority wants to build a swimming pool, and then they were looking for architects who had already built 3 swimming pools. And if you had built 4 swimming pools or 5 or 6, you get more points. And you were the one that was taken to the second round, because that one he knows how to do, because he has already built 6 swimming pools. And we won't take that one because he has never built a swimming pool before. But what the client was forgetting that the one with 6 swimming pools, yeah, one day he had never built 1 swimming pool either. So you have to start somewhere. And they were also not judging, yeah, but were those swimming pools, in fact, were they good swimming pools? It was just about quantity and not about quality. So the system to choose the best architect was, in fact, in some cases, allowing an architect to build a bad 7th swimming pool. And so that was not working. That was not the goal of public procurement. So in fact, consolidating a monopoly. So that's why we've been cleaning up a lot of these kind of access conditions. So for instance, we don't ask a turnover. So it's never a criterion of the architect's company. We only ask 3 references. So one is on the program. And so we don't ask, for instance, if it's a kindergarten, we don't ask you should have built a kindergarten. We just say you should have built an educational program, so that there is a bit more, that more people can apply. Then one is on the fact that it's delivered and in time and so on, so that you're also able to deliver. And also the budget. But then for a project of 10 million euro, we don't expect that you have already done a project of 10 million euro, but only 30 or 50% of 10 million euro. Because, so that architects can climb up the ladder. And also between a project of 5 million euro and 10 million euro, there is not that much difference. There is a difference between 1 million and 10 million, okay. So that's why we have some minimum requirements, but then in the end, that makes no much difference. The third reference is also always about the context. So we want architects who have the capacity to build in an urban context, not somewhere in Flanders fields. So, and then we also ask a motivation note. So 1 page, you don't have to make design proposals. You don't have to explain what kind of project that you see there, because that's creative work, and creative work should be remunerated. But we want you to explain, why are you applying So what is interesting for you in the brief? What do you think is the crucial thing in this project? So what is the research that you will do? What is the crucial question here? So did you well understand what we are looking for? So not yet an answer, but did you well understand the question? For instance, this is the project for the new Museum of Contemporary Art in collaboration with Centre Pompidou in a former Citroën garage in Brussels. So the biggest competition that I organized, and we applied exactly the same system. So more than 150 million euro, but you only had to have had one project of, I think so, something like 45 to 75 million euro. Only one art reference, not necessarily 3 main museums in other cities. And then motivation notes. And then we had a lot of applications, nearly 100, also the big stars, Japanese architects and so on. And some of these motivation notes, well, they could have functioned for a museum in Abu Dhabi as well. Or they were just saying, I'm important and I'm a big one, so you should take me because I have made many museums. Okay, but we were interested not in you, but what you can do for us here on this site in Brussels. And so that helped very much to put them aside and to choose the architects that had understood, okay, this is a former Citroën garage. This is along the canal in Brussels. This is a poor neighborhood. How will we also deal with gentrification? I've read in the program that the building wants to be free and open, so if a large part of the building you will not have to pay, you just can enter. I think that's great, I want to work on that. So you could filter the architects who were really interested in the project and the architects that were just doing the business as usual. Also on low access conditions, because I think you know that Belgian architects are in Europe doing very well, teaching everywhere and so on. So there has been a kind of hausse or rise of Belgian architects. I think that's because there are good architects, but also because good architects have a lot of opportunities in the Belgian competition system. So they can move up and have experience. So for the very small projects, so if the fee is below 140,000, 3,000, that's European legislation. So if the fee is below that level, you can just ask 3 architects. So you don't have to work with criteria and references and so on. And so in the beginning, public clients came to me, okay, dear Bouwmeester, give me some names, and we will ask them. Or you had other clients, and they were always asking the same ones, because we know them, and we know that they are good. So it's not healthy, it's not refreshing. And for me, it was also kind of problem of deontology. I didn't want to give names, because then they would say, okay, they are the friends of the Bouwmeester, and so on. So we organized a system now that if it's below 143,000 euro, we launch a call. You only have 1 week to answer. We ask no references, no official documents, no proof of insurance and all these kind of administrative documents. We just ask 1 A4 where you explain, I would like to mount this kind of team, probably with that engineer, but I'm not sure yet. And I have this kind of experience, and then motivation, why am I applying? And then we choose 3 of them to make the project. And so this is very successful for the young architects, because they can have access to public projects. Also very successful because it's light, so you don't have a lot of documents to send in, so it's very dynamic. And so, for instance, in the same building that is now nearly finished, we organized this also for the interior design of the bookshop and the brasserie and so on. So we had both. So the very big competition with internationals, Rem Koolhaas was in the competition and so on. And Cursus St. John. Surgeon Bates has been winning. But also very small offices for these kind of interventions. So I like it a lot because the winners here, they had not yet a name for their office. So they won the competition and they created a name after the competition. That was stage one. So how to be open, to give opportunity to a lot of architects to apply, and how to choose then 3 to 5. Then second round. Those 3 to 5, well, then we ask them to produce something. A sketch design or a vision, so they have to come up with ideas, of course. And we think, yeah, then you have to pay them. And so we have now a kind of system that it's minimum 500 euros per A3. So it's in most cases, it's around 10,000 euro, which is not enough, which is not covering the costs of participating in the competition. So that's the weak part in Brussels. It should be higher. But it's difficult to explain to a client that he should provide more money for the people that are losing, that he will not work with. So that doesn't work very well. But so we could improve that. On the other hand, what we try to do then is, in fact, the opposite thing. Okay, it's only 10,000 euro, but perhaps you don't have to draw everything on 1 to 50. Or if it's 200 apartments, perhaps you should show that, for instance, 3 types of apartments. So the standard one, a difficult one that we impose, the corner one, and then one that you can choose so that you can show, okay, I can innovate. And that's enough. So we don't need all of the floor plans and sections and facades and materials. We want a good idea and a good potential. It's not a building permit now. That's for later. We are looking for the architect with the highest potential, not with all of the details. And so, for instance, for this competition with a private developer, so this is, that was the golden age in the 1970s. It's the seat of an insurance company in a park. So it's a palace in a park with a pond. It's a beautiful building, but they left the building, so it was empty. It had to be transformed. Competition with a private developer. And then there will be housing, but that's in the end it's a hotel and office in the upper floors, and then new activities, restaurants and a sports club and so on in the ground floor. And then we said, okay, but every good architect in the second round can make offices and hotel on the upper floors. So we will ask in the competition, sorry, I pushed on the wrong button, yep. We will ask for the competition only a layout and also architecture for the ground floor. Because that is the issue here. The palace and the park, how to open it up so that people come there, so that it's being used. That is standard, everyone can do that. That is special, that is what this competition is about. And so that's why the drawings, for instance, here the winning project is by Caruso St. John and Bovenbouw. It's only on the ground floor, and it's showing how the building is opening up, and also it's a heritage building, how things are integrated, and so on. So that's what we try to do to reduce the workload in the competition by focusing on what is really at stake. Competitions are not anonymous. Architects should be able to present a project for the jury. Is that in your country the case? Anonymity is not, okay, that's fine. Because in some countries, it's really an issue. So you only have white models. All the models should be in the same color. And if you're a bit experienced like me, I can tell who is who. So that's doesn't work. So we have in Belgium 25 years already non-anonymous competitions, and it works very well. No scandals, not always my friends who are winning or something like that. It's important to have this presentation because architects should be able to explain. So if you just read it, sometimes you have misunderstood something. And then when they explain, okay, I see now why you do it. I thought it was completely for another reason. So that's really important. Our juries are professional juries, so no politicians in the jury, unless for public space. So public space is with the mayor mostly in the jury. We also have people of the public administration in the jury, so the ones that will be responsible for the building permit afterwards, so that there is already kind of check on beforehand, and also that that there is a kind of continuity. So when the stage of the building permit is there, well, they should treat the building permit in the same way as on the competition. I can say, hey, but you were there in the competition. How can you say now that it's a wrong project? You should have said that when you were in the jury. So it's also a way of committing those people. And we always have one external jury member, only one. And for public space, we work with also a citizen panel in the jury. That's here the case. So this is a bad example, but because there are many, many people. In fact, yeah, Brussels is bilingual and Brussels is complex, so there are more people in the jury than I would prefer. So in normal juries, we have, or in ideal juries, when I was working in Antwerp, it was not more than 5 or 6 people. So you can have a good discussion. Here there are many people, many more, so these are all officials, and these are citizens of the citizen panel. And so that's now for public space the standard. We give the citizens panel because so there's a representative of the shops in the neighborhood. There's a representative of I don't know a kind of committee of inhabitants. There was a representative of X and so on. We give them one vote for the entire jury, because if every one of them has one vote, they are just defending their own point of view. And it's funny to see that they suddenly realize they have to agree in the same way that we have to agree. So that making a decision in a jury is looking for compromise and consensus. And so it helps also so they are useful as kind of ambassadors for the project later. So it's something that we are testing now since 1 or 2 years. So we have only 5 or 6 juries like that, but until now it works. Last thing about competitions is transparency. Rien à cacher, nothing to hide. So we are fully showing everything, so that they don't have the idea. Architects sometimes have the what's happening there in this kind of jury committees. So we have, I didn't explain that to you, I think so. We have also competitions where the architects can be present during the presentations of their colleagues or concurrents, not the jury debate, of course, and not the Q&A. And so that they know already what the other ones have presented. And sometimes that helps. So architects say, okay, that one was better. Everyone can see it. But after the competition, we publish what is called, so on our website, for each competition there is a fact sheet, a kind of summary of the jury report and of the 5 proposals. But since 23, we also publish the full competition entries, so the complete dossiers, so that someone who wants to check if we made the right decision can do that. It's also, so it's about total transparency, nothing to hide. It's also a kind of learning tool, because I think, so I'm convinced that the quality of architecture in Belgium has been going up because giving opportunities in competitions, but also this kind of openness in the competition, so that architects learn from each other. They can, okay, that one had a good proposal. Perhaps I'm inspired for my next competition. Or also just the techniques of presenting a project, so the rhetorics, how do you make a good competition presentation? And so they can learn from each other. And so I think in that sense, quality is going up in general. Architects did not always agree that we would publish it afterwards. But we could convince the clients, and so then the architects, well, it's in the contract. So yeah, I think you've understood. So this, in my job, it's not about hard power, deciding. So it's not about power, in fact. It's a bit about authority. That's something else that you have to deserve also. It's about soft power. It's each time about convincing, giving arguments, pushing, and looking for coalitions of people who are willing for change. And I think this kind of role in cities is quite important. You need, of course, the regular stuff. You need building permits, you need planning legislation, and so on. But you need perhaps also something extra if you want to go for really excellence. I would like to what's the time? Yeah. I just want to announce on this, so because it was a bit a presentation on governance and technical thing, that's okay for you, I think so. But of course, why do we do it? Not just because we love bureaucracy and this kind of things and governance. And so we make use of the entire system to put also ideas on the agenda. And so what we've been doing with the team the last years, for instance, is a lot on productive city. I've been explaining that, so that the fact that you should keep industry in the city. Our main topic today is adaptive reuse, that you should stop demolishing everything, but maintaining buildings, maintaining the concrete structure of buildings. That's very actual in Brussels because we have, different than in your city perhaps, we have a decrease in office space. So people are working at home, we have too many offices, 25% of the offices is empty, at least. And we have a housing need. So we want to push a lot of transformation of office buildings, banal office buildings, into housing projects. Not by demolishing the office building and rebuilding, but by keeping at least the concrete structure, because there is a lot of CO2 embedded in the building. There is a lot of emissions you can avoid by keeping buildings. We've been working on opening up to civil society, so inviting people in, citizens in the jury. And affordability of housing is a big problem in Brussels, so that's why we promote the model of cooperative housing. So the finance model behind cooperative housing, because corporations in Belgium do not exist. So the Belgians are buyers, owners in the classical sense, and well, we try to convince to change the mentality. That's it. Thank you.
So to somehow jump straight to it, thank you very much. I wish we could go on, and we will after this couple of questions. I think first maybe an observation. I liked when you said also it is about, the BMA is also about the group of people that come together and initiate certain change or need change. And that's maybe also how I see ASAP in general, and also people here in the room. Change is not something we're all somehow accustomed to immediate, or we want immediate, no, to work. We immediately want tomorrow the secret, the solution to something that will change the world. It's not how it works. Culture takes time. That's why I think it's key to understand that in the next, let's say, couple of years of our mission, also to talk about the competition culture, many more topics. Now, I'll start with one or two questions, and then I will give the word to the audience. There's, as you see, many questions here, so we always have enough. If there's no questions, I will point fingers. That's how it's going to work. So someone will have to ask a question, so think fast. Maybe the first one is the classic, it is, well, why not a competition? It's also something we talk about a lot in ASAP, and also we talked about that with you today. I mean, just to mention a few: increased costs, extended timelines for clients for their perspective. Because if you imagine this room is full of clients for a moment, there is a limited control still over outcomes. How do you regulate that? Perhaps short answers will help. Risk of unbuildable, silly designs, a classic narrative in the hands of a client. Then there is also one which is the intellectual property in general. With public clients, also administrative complexity, not an easy one. One of the most difficult ones is public scrutiny, judgment. Nobody wants to be on the hot chair, no? Budget for each client, public or private. It comes down to that in the end. And so from the client's perspective, how do you deal with the why not?
Yeah, it really depends if it's a public client or a private client, because a public client anyway has to do public procurement, so there is legislation. And then, in fact, what we're proposing is simplification of that legislation. So in many cases, our enemies were the lawyers who make everything more complex and more difficult. And so we say, okay, no, let's try to reduce it. Let's not have 12 criteria for doing the jury, because that's a lot of work and you have to say something on everything. Let's say 4 main criteria and that's it. So making things simpler. So that helps for the public clients. And also there is a kind of track record that so that's easy because we've been working as bouwmeesters in general, 20, 25 years on it. So there is no need of convincing them anymore. For private clients, I can recognize all of these questions. So the risk of crazy architects who will, and then you're the victim of the architect. So but that's also, the personal role I have to play, and so to convince, and so then no. But we, as a bouwmeester and as a city in general, we are not interested in these kind of paper projects for the magazines. We want buildings to be built. We want impact outside. And so I will be your partner. It's taking a longer time, yes, but look at what happened now with your former project. You had an architect, you worked in a kind of closed circuit, and now you present it to us and everything is wrong. You're losing time now. Perhaps if you would spend some time for the competition, and you can engage already the public authority who will be involved in the planning permit, then your planning permit will go quicker. So you lose some time now, right? But you win some time in the end. So there are many answers to all of these things. Budget is important, sure. So competition is not just carte blanche, do what you want. You have to respect the budget. So we ask for an estimation, of course, in the competition. So the answers are, so it was difficult in the beginning to convince some developers, not all of them. Also some developers are good guys and interested in quality. It exists as well. They're not all bad guys. And so it was also kind of emulation. So from the moment there was 1, 2, 3, then the other ones, well, if they wanted to be modern, they had to follow.
So in a way, you could say you partner up with the client.
Yeah, it's both. You partner up with the client, and that's, you could say, towards the client the first step, and also you have comprehension for the concerns of the client. But once the client is on board, you also protect the role of the architect in the system. So in the competition and procedures, it's also protecting the architect. So it's hybrid. It's working on both sides.
And where is their activism? Because let's say now, for a moment, that we imagine the room is also full of activists who really have a problem with private development for whatever reason. So the roles are shifting very fast. What about that scrutiny effect? What about that judgment on you? What's your failure? What's your experience in that? Because it does sound like it works really well, but the failures probably brought you here. Huh? It probably hasn't been like that in the beginning. So what about that? What about from the perspective of the client about the scrutiny? And also then, I think, from the perspective of the architect, the designer, because if a public sort of focuses you as the problem, whether being a client or the architect, where do you stand in that process, and actually how is that conversation facilitated?
Yeah. Yeah, it's important for the bouwmeester to be conscious all of the time about integrity and about defending the public goods. So in that sense, so sometimes you're making mistakes, but then you can repair them. So in the end, so there has been, for instance, also kind of criticism of activists that the bouwmeester was too much on the side of the developers. But on the other hand, the developers, they don't trust me because they know that I also talk with the activists. So I don't have a clear answer. It's about, yeah, it takes some time in creating trust on both sides. And also, yeah, I'm quite proud, you could say, that in my cell phone I have the number of the biggest developer in Brussels, but also of a real Marxist activists. And I can talk with both of them without being, you could say, neutral, without a point of view. So you shouldn't think that the bouwmeester is just a neutral moderator. So it's so you try to engage both for more quality.
I think in your book that we have here with us tonight, and I think I invite everyone to at least have a look at it, you say also, to link to that, because we work for no one, we can work with everyone, if I'm correct, which is, it's a burden. But if maybe I can continue with the activism from the perspective of a group of architects. I know for the Zin project, actually before the whole project happened, the architects that were not even supposed to get the project were the activists who sort of entered and squatted the building and sort of created lovely programs, shop and part-time offices and residences and so on, and only later actually got to really work on the project. So I guess also a part of activism is also with our profession. But then to go back to the topic, which is also one of my my favorite ones, is this question of adaptive reuse. Is something that we will tap into. We found out that the economy outside really works on production of new square meters, especially residential at the moment in Belgrade, which no one knows how they will fill. Neither now, it's a speculation, it's a kind of bubble. Neither now or in how many years when God knows these residents where they are. So this question of adaptive reuse, you said your first 5 years were about 10,000. Am I correct? 10,000 new inhabitants per year?
Yeah, so densification.
Densification.
Yeah.
And I think the last 5 years were about 2 degrees.
Yeah.
That's quite a change in geometry. So how to talk to a client, I'll go back to that, and to the architect at the same time, that it's not about the 10,000, that it's about the 2 degrees.
Yeah, or that we should evolve to the 2 degrees, that is important as well. Yeah, but then again, it's... So I think a bouwmeester is also a catalyst of knowledge that we all share. Because also developers, they also feel that it's becoming too warm in the city, that the planet is warming up and that we should do something. And that if you demolish a building, you're losing a lot of CO2. So there is a kind of intellectual openness as well. So what the bouwmeester is, also for instance, what you were telling about the activists in the squatting the building, the role is also to bring what is coming up from bottom up then into policy. So I think also you have to, I think in urban planning, we're making that shift. So 10 years ago, when I was an urban planner, climate change was not the topic as today, but we are confronted more and more with real effects in our daily life. So that's changing the way that we should work in our discipline. And that's making the shift is sometimes difficult, but it's necessary. It's also interesting because it brings new kind of architecture. So this kind of adaptive reuse in Brussels, keeping the structure of the building or trying to demolish less in any case, is also changing the profile of the architect. So the architect before who had a kind of signature and proper style, you can recognize my building because my buildings are always white and with horizontal windows or something like that. That doesn't work anymore today. So authorship is also shifting. And it's not less architecture. We're not losing something because you have, in an existing building, you have to even be more creative in order to find solutions. So it's also, I think, it's a kind of general shift that is necessary and that is happening in all your work, in fact. Yeah.
And as a small observation on that, I think what particularly we appreciated today in the conversation we had with you and the group was that by tackling such topics which are not easy to solve, there is no solution. No one knows how to do adaptive reuse or actually how to work with circularity still. It is actually the model of a competition that can help because it is about the focused model. It is not about I can do it all, I can show you what I've got. It is about actually precision behind that, that can bring in fresh voice or a very old voice, does not matter, with very simple means to actually construct that narrative and to show what is enough for a kind of first change. So I think that also can paint a picture of how much change we at first can take and need. But maybe before I go on with my paper, to ask if somebody has questions. Yes, first there was...
Thank you so much for the beautiful presentation and for sharing with us architects the sophisticated set of rules for competitions. Thank you. I'm an urban planner as well, and I'm much more interested in how the system was established within the city, because I was working with 3 city architects in my professional career, and it seems that I figure out some kind of challenges in establishing the systems. And I really do like how the system of competition in Brussels became inclusive for all architects, understandable for developers as well as authorities. So my first question, I have 2 questions related. My first is, how long did it take for you to establish such kind of system? Because it seems to be so complex and on the other hand, so acceptable for all. And the related question would be, did it help that this is your second mandate, so maybe a longer experience in this communication with all participants, with all stakeholders is providing better results? Thank you so much.
Yeah, the system has been evolving all of the time and it's still evolving. So for instance, Citizens Panel is a new thing that we are testing now. So it will continue evolving. So you shouldn't be desperate in the sense that, oh no, it takes 20 years and that's... I think the main shifts were done in less than 5 years. Also, for instance, then with private developers, you had to convince some, and once you had 1, 2, 3, the other ones were following easily. So it's what has been my role, but also of my colleagues, is to keep on evolving, so not just stopping. So the very basic version of what sounds now like a sophisticated system was easily done. So there are some easy tricks, and so only 2 steps, a kind of remuneration. So the principles are important. So also the principle of fixing the fee in the beginning, I think it took perhaps 2 years to install the principle that the fee is fixed. And that was more discussions with juridical people that say, oh, European legislation doesn't permit, and then bringing counter-arguments and explaining how, and so on. And then since then, the work has been more of increasing that fee bit by bit. So the main changes can go quickly if you want. And so 2 mandates, no, I would say. So what in my case plays is that I have experience, but then you have experience in the team also. So the specialists are in the team and also in other teams of bouwmeesters. So that's my 2 terms that didn't play a role. Yeah.
Liliana had a question.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a technical question, not technical, but about which sites in the city are chosen to be for competition. Are some obligatory? And is this base of competition sites being enlarged in a way?
Yeah.
You have more and more competitions from small ones to big ones. Is it only the public? And how do you decide which sites are going for competition and which are not?
It's in fact black and white in the sense that for public projects, you don't have to choose. The law imposes it. Small or big, you need a public procurement. And so what we do is translate public procurement as a competition. And then for private projects, there is nothing like, so it's not mandatory, it's not imposed, there's not something, so, because in some cities, I think Zurich is one city, in some cities it's possible that you are obliged to organize a competition as a private developer. In Brussels, that's not the case, so it's on free basis. So they ask me spontaneously to organize a competition. Of course, in the beginning, I've been using a bit of hard power or power play and say, okay, I will be here 5 years. I will give you a review of your project at the building permit. Perhaps it's better that we start collaborating earlier on, because then you will have a good review. That's logic. Or I don't have much time. I have to choose. And of course, I will invest more time in helping developers who organize the competition with getting there, and I will supporting them. But if you're just doing it in the old school way, I will treat you correctly, but I don't really give you priority. So in the beginning, it was a bit of power play. But then now I think it's very healthy, because the idea is also not that all private projects should have a competition. That's not feasible. And that all competitions should involve the bouwmeester. And so they can organize competitions themselves if they want to compare architects. But now, and that's the best thing, if they realize, okay, here it's really a tough problem. Here we really need new ideas. We need to open it up. Then they come now spontaneously to the bouwmeester to organize a competition. That's the best thing. So in the beginning, I had to push and force and convince. Now we are more like waiting and available, which is, yeah, good.
Yes.
So I would have 2 questions. One would be relatively quickly and short. Given the transparency and the openness of the procedure, does a public vote, given the multiculturality, play a decision in your decisions or in the whole process, and up to what extent? And the second one would be, given the 2 degrees goal, and I don't know the Belgian, let's say, the profession, but usually many of architects, even Europe-wide, are even not familiar with the LCA as a word. So playing with LCA and playing with embodied carbon is also, let's say, a science for itself, but also a design logic for itself. How do you deal with this problematic, given that from 2027 or 2030, you will be having a number? So it's not even going to be a 2 degrees. It's going to be total, I don't know, 50 kilowatt hour per square meter or kilogram CO2 per square meter allowed. How do you engage, or how do you generate the future generation of architects who will be able to play with that?
Yeah. Two good questions, because 2 points where I have to say that it's not a success story. Because, of course, these kind of presentations is often also showing, okay, look at us, how we are doing well. So these are the weaker points. So the multicultural composition of the people in Brussels, yeah, that is not enough addressed. So representation in the jury. In my team, I have, I think I only have people with a Belgian background. And then what we try to do is, so in the public space competitions, as I said, a citizens panel. And that citizens panel is supposed to be representative. On the other hand, it's also, I think, choosing the best project is also professional work. We were trained, we have a diploma, so you just can't have a kind of open voting system either. And then the second question, yeah, I think, so Denmark and Netherlands, you can see in Denmark and the Netherlands, there are already standards about the carbon emission that is allowed in the project. There is a problem that there is not yet one standard way of calculating. Also, what we have been developing in Brussels is, for instance, a totem tool, where that architects, so LCA analysis, but also that the emissions that are linked to the production of materials and the transport of materials. But it remains, and so that is the embodied carbon or energy in the materials that I will use in the building. But what is still neglected in the calculations is keeping the existing building. And that is, in fact, a main factor. So you could have all of these kind of recycle and reuse materials, but you're still demolishing the existing building. So we've been in Belgium, in Brussels, you have Rotor, which was very active, so in the kind of collective in this kind of reuse of materials. We have been changing the building code in Brussels, but it's not yet approved. And the idea was to have a kind of minimum requirements in the building code. But the conclusion was that the standards, European standards, are not yet clear enough in order to do that. So I would welcome, so again, I think change is necessary. We will go there anyway, so let's embrace it and let's start working on it now. And we could do that more in Brussels than we are currently doing. If I'm talking about adaptive reuse, it's mainly maintaining buildings instead of demolishing them, but I think that's important, and that's typical role of the Bouwmeester, because we are there really in the beginning. And then it's also about showing that it can become good quality architecture as well. So that's not just good for the sustainability, but also just interesting architecture. So your question is more the technical question, in fact.
Sort of also the design, because it's quality of design. At the moment, the topic of energy is basically just a thought, okay, let's minimize, let's keep the buildings as they are. Like in terms of design logic, we will just replace the materials to lower the carbon. We will also, let's say, insulate them with bio-based insulation, etc. But we won't change the logic of the space. And that's where the architects, if they would deal with this topic on a much more, let's say, optimal way, and if they are equipped, then this problem could even go way lower than, let's say, our thresholds, which are now.
Yeah.
With this very intuitive, just switching materials or maximally isolating.
Yeah.
We are underestimating the potential of design within the carbon limits to produce, let's say, not unexplainable, but like unexpected results. That can be a push towards a completely different type of architecture.
Yeah, that's why I always use adaptive reuse and not just reuse. So it's also about intervening, and sometimes also demolishing a part of it, because you can achieve sustainability goals in another way, in a more fundamental way.
There are more questions? There is one.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I want to thank you for this very nice and comprehensive lecture that you gave. As I see, as you introduced to us, the emphasis was on the competitions. But I must say that I love all the 5 tools that you presented to us today, that you use in your work. As you mentioned, one of them, it's a design review. I would say that tool is very, very useful, and that you have the support in the law for using that tool. I mean, is that some city decision, or it is a governmental law? And also, I would like to ask you more about these simplified procedures that you mentioned, which are very useful to engage younger practitioners to get involved with the public procurement competitions. I would like, if you can, explain us in a few words the relation between the public procurement boundaries and the procedures and the law, and the procedures which you were presented to us as simplified procedures, which we would all like to have also in a way. Thank you.
So the first question, so Brussels is a region, and you have, so in the state organization of Belgium, it's a region, but with the scale of a city. And so that means urban planning legislation is regional competence. So that's why Brussels can make its own laws. And so that's why Brussels decided to have this kind of 5,000 square meter design review in the legislation. So we don't need the government. We are our own government. Because indeed in many countries it's a problem that the city wants something, but then the national government doesn't want it, or the other cities have to agree, and so then it doesn't happen. That also means, for instance, that our urban planning legislation is very much focused on urban topics, because the region of Brussels, it's all urbanized. So we don't have to negotiate with smaller municipalities or agricultural municipalities what to put in the legislation. So that's, the Belgian system is complicated, but that's a good advantage. We have a kind of autonomy. And the second question is, as I explained more or less, so European legislation says below 143,000 euros of fee, so something like a project of 1 million euro budget, you can directly ask 3 architects. And so that's the legal thing. You have to prove that you have invited 3, that not just 1. And then what we organized is in parallel, so it's not illegal, but extra legal. In order to choose those 3, we will do a call. So you could claim, in fact, the client chooses 3, but says, okay, but instead of taking, I don't know, the list of all architects and A, B, C, I will organize a call and I will choose 3 of this list. And so that's why there are no regulations on selection criteria, references, and so on. You can just choose 3. But it, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, but I think informality is a typical tool of the Bouwmeester. I often don't use it because in English, also informal economy, that's something else. Yeah. But it's about formal tools and informal tools and using both.
Sorry, just try to clarify a bit, second more. Actually, the law on public procurement, you apply in the second stage of the competition, if I would say.
Yeah, so the second, so from the moment that we invite 3 architects, then it becomes full public procurement legislation.
Yeah. Everything is clear, thank you.
Just maybe to round up, when we started tonight, Igor told me, tonight you're ASAP. So I'll take that chance if you allow me. You say in your book, being a Baumeister, also organizing competitions, is about tightrope walking. It is a lot about,
Yeah.
it's exciting, but you can fall.
Yeah.
To me, what let's say, just to bring certain messages to the evening, is also a lot about that autonomy. It's that agency you created with the BMA team. It's about that autonomy that created authority, because in fact you cannot offer much, but you can offer a lot to everyone, a little bit, in the sense of bringing together and facilitating the dialogue. And it is also through that design, through that core skill of an architect, a precision and design, being active and initiating things, that also in a public position, you were able to slowly change the system and set, let's say, the table for all. And whether that is an official role or a private agency or a group of architects, it is about making it simple and not thinking that it's too complicated, but actually pioneering it constantly and working on it. So I think for that care, for showing us that care, I thank you very much. I hope we can bring a bit of that into the work we're going to take into next couple of years, and looking forward to see you again in Belgrade. Thank you, Christian.
Good success. Yeah.